Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar entitled Preparing Instructors for DMA Modules. I'm Dan McClellan, e-learning coordinator for the North Carolina Bio Network, and our webinar is scheduled to run from 2 p.m. until approximately 3 p.m. Eastern Time. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists today, Cindy and Susan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about preparing instructors for DMA modules. On March 29th, there was a webinar called Preparing for DMA Implementation. And while there'll be some overlap, our goal today is to focus even more on the details at the course level and raise questions that instructors should be asking. Of course, there is not one way to deliver these modules any more than there was one way to teach a Math 060, for example. So our goal is just to help you consider options so that you'll have the best DMA course offering at your college. Just to get us started, a quick review of some of the design principles that will help guide our discussion. We have a modular format that can be completed in 1 year. The curriculum is focused on conceptual understanding and the use of contextually based problems. We want a curriculum that promotes the use of appropriate technology, problem solving and critical thinking are a central theme, and then an optional delivery method, lots of variations in ways that these courses can be implemented. Some of the key changes that may be a change for your college, of course this will vary from one to another, but how are calculators going to be integrated into these modules? To what extent will the skill, conceptual, contextual knowledge, how much will that be a change for you? Were you very skill-based? Or had you already integrated conceptual and contextual kinds of problems? What will your assessment policies be? How will the schedules be run? Method of delivery, materials? How will you go about integrating student success tips? Now that eventually we'll have a more specific diagnostic placement, how will that impact delivery? And then the change to a pass-repeat grade.
The modules and the new curriculum are all going to be listed under successnc.org, but they're not currently there. However, you'll see posted in the chat box an email address for Sharon Smith at northcarolinaCommunityColleges.edu. And if you don't already have a copy of the modules, you can email her and she will email them to you. She will send them to you. Some of the questions that come up when we think about the curriculum and the materials are, will your school be using a textbook at all? And if so, will it be a hard copy or an e-book? Will it be a customized book for your school, or are you going to just use one of the standard books that are out there? Some of the colleges are creating workbooks. I think this is especially true for the flexible pace schools. And this is one way to get a lot of the conceptual activities built into your course. Will your college be creating worksheets for group problems and group activities and conceptual activities? And if so, will they be college-wide or on an individual instructor basis? When we think about the computer, are you using some computer software that's mostly skill and drill, or does the software have a conceptual piece to it? And then will you be using computers as part of your regularly scheduled class time, or might it just be for some additional homework? As you create your course, we suggest you continually refer to the new modules and the student learning outcomes. One of the questions that we've asked ourselves is it important that students do only what is required, meaning if you have mastery set, let's say, at 85%, will your students do any more than the 85%? Do they need to do more than the 85%, or will they just stop once they hit that 85? Okay. Is it important that you find software that can have some conceptual problems and a conceptual approach to it? Some schools say yes, some schools say no. It can be difficult at times to find some programs that do that. And so what you just need to keep in mind is that if your software is not conceptual in nature, that you supplement another way, and that might be a workbook, okay? Some of the colleges, whether they're flexibly paced or not, are doing all of their assignments, including their testing, online. Some are doing a lot of their work online, but still having paper pencil tests. So that's just some thoughts you need to consider as you create your course. I think we've already addressed the supplements, department-wide supplements. And again, everything can be done online, in paper, pencil, or both. Okay.
One of the features in the modules are study skills that are associated with each module, student success tips. So do you have a method already for integrating that into your developmental courses, or is this something that you can consider now as you relook at your curriculum? How can you use the strengths of counselors, advisors, other school initiatives to be a support to the student and to the math faculty as you consider this? Would it be something formal or informal within the classroom, or required or optional outside of the classroom? One pilot plan that was attempted at Central Piedmont was to associate a specific topic with a module. So Module 1 had math anxiety, and what we did was schedule with our counseling and advising sessions, as you see posted there at various times that were next to the classes that students were attending. So we attempted to create a schedule that would be easy for students to attend. For Module 1, what we did was make it a required homework assignment. So they had to, outside of class, attend this session on math anxiety. We didn't get a lot of attendance, so we tried another approach for Module 2. Same thing, we had the schedule set up with various times that counselors offered a time management session, and we offered a quiz grade of 100 for attending, and that was an extra credit opportunity. Still, unfortunately, did not get good attendance, so that's what a pilot is. You try different things and you see what's going to work. Some of them are successful and some aren't. The test-taking skills is just being done virtually, and we will continue to look at this as a way to integrate the student success skills in the courses, but keep working on that particular one. We need to go forward there. This idea of skill, conceptual, contextual, is very much a part of the modules. The conceptual learning, just another definition, learning that promotes student understanding of concepts and reasons behind them. It's contextual when we can put that into a frame of reference that a student can connect to. A dominant theme through all of this is to keep coming back to have the students say, does the answer make sense? Does the answer make sense? Over and over again. Can they put the steps that they are doing in a context that makes what they're doing stick with them and make sense to them? As we look at moving from modules to courses, what are some of the big things in terms of schedule that are differences? And one major thing is that mastery now comes in smaller pieces of content. So we have 8 distinct modules as opposed to the 3 or 4 semester-long courses. These are discrete topics, yet each knowledge level spirals. So, for example, Module 1, we introduce signed numbers, and then in Module 2, you, of course, use that as you extend to fractions and decimals. Pythagorean theorem problems might be in Module 1. But carefully selected perfect triples. Then in Module 2, when we have an use of decimals, we can extend that. So even though the modules are separate, the knowledge level still spirals. Multiple exit points based on the program of study. Specifically an advantage, for example, non-STEM students. Now we don't necessarily have to do all of the factoring that would have been required in an 070 course. And now we're going to look in some more detail at some possible delivery methods.
One type of delivery method might be an emporium, so a large room with multiple computers and all of your classes being held in that lab. Those classes are flexibly paced, and then you can also have the traditional seated classes. And we say other because there's just so many variations of the flexibly paced courses. As previously mentioned, we can have one large emporium that might have 100 or 200 computers in there and multiple classes running concurrently. Some colleges have computer classrooms, so perhaps they have 10 classrooms with 20 or 25 computers, and the students all meet 5 times a week in that classroom. Those are often at fixed times, but they can be flexibly timed as well. And then there's a combination of both of those, where one course may have some fixed time and some flexible time. And I'm sure there's other options as well. Okay, so how does a flexibly paced course work? A student right now will register for one semester long course, the Math 60, the Math 70, or the Math 80. This will change when the official shells are in place. We're not sure yet exactly when that'll happen, but the proposal that's on the table right now is for there to be 2 and 3 credit shells that last for an entire semester, and a 1 credit shell that is just a mini-mester, just 8 weeks. Okay. If you're going to be running a seated classroom, there's a few questions that you would need to ask yourself. And that is, will your students have access to computers? If so, then that raises a third question is, will the computers be used during class time? Will it be used just on a self-paced basis, or perhaps it's just used for homework? Okay. We have a third option, which is seated, and it's combined with some flexible pacing. One of the beta colleges is currently allowing students to move as quickly as possible, but when they finish 4 weeks worth of material or 1 DMA, they can't move ahead. So that's not exactly the same as an emporium, but they could potentially finish a course in 2 or 3 weeks and then not have to come to class anymore until the next 4-week DMA starts. Just a little bit about how you register students for the seated classes, the traditional classes. Students need to register for up to 4 DMAs in a semester. What they need to keep in mind is that if they fail 1 DMA, they need to withdraw from the next one and sign up again for the one that they were not successful in. Currently, in the flexible pacing courses, a student registers for one of the existing 60, 70, or 80 courses. They can complete more than 1 course in a semester if they're very diligent about working outside of class. They will be given a grade of P or R, pass or repeat, for each course. And this last bullet that you see, the status of NC or CC, this is, again, a proposal that's under discussion, but it talks about each of the individual DMAs getting credit as well as the 60, 70, or 80 course. And this may or may not be the way that that final statement plays out. It may just be a grade for Math 60, 70, or 80. That's still being discussed.
So this timeline of instruction is something that instructors need to invest a considerable amount of time in. As a part of the document that was referred to earlier, there's a suggested timeline, and for example, you can see what's in that document for Module 3. So just a general guideline for the objectives within each. But here's a specific example of a seated pace schedule for Module 3. And this particular example is a 16-day. The class was offered Monday through Thursday. And one thing I want to point out is in the sections, the column on the far right, you'll notice that the section numbers do not flow consistently. There's a Chapter 5 in there, a Chapter 7 in there, and a little bit of jumping around, and then 2 points that a PowerPoint was supplemented to the section. So as you start to build your pace schedules and your courses using existing materials, you're going to find that there's not always a good match with the materials that you have, the way they're laid out, and the modules as we develop them. So this is where some considerable time will have to take place, thinking how are the students going to flow through these objectives using materials you have or as you're developing new materials. The next 2 slides are an example of one kind of flexible pace schedule. This is a guide for students, an assignment checklist to kind of help keep them on target. You know, it outlines a topic a day to give them, again, a goal. And then you'll see at the end of the pace schedule is where the flexibility comes in. Students could work ahead, but if they were to work at this suggested pace of a topic a day, then the module exam would be April 12th, today. And then, if needed, remediation and the first retake opportunity would be the 17th. The flexibility comes in that for students who have fallen behind, they have the additional dates through to the end of the semester to go ahead and still take that exam. So there's multiple exit points for students who can work ahead, and then the opportunity for students who need to work a little slower than the suggested pace to still complete the work. This is another example just of a 16-day pace that has for the last day a transition day built in. So this would give instructors and students within the framework of the course a day to know whether they have passed and need to just go ahead on to the registered course or do the withdraw and sign up for repeating the module. In the previous one that I showed you, since we had a Monday to Thursday, that transition day was Friday, and that would have been outside of class. Here's an example of a 20-day schedule. Again, as you sit down at your college and look at your schedules and try to work the materials the best way that you can for your school. These are just some options to consider. I think I said back on that other one, that flexible pace was a Monday through Thursday. We do also offer Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday courses in that same setup.
So scheduling the end of the module, some decisions that are college-based will be if your module exams are common across your department, or if every instructor will be creating their own. The 80% mastery has been dictated to us by the state. And then for remediation, students will get a second try if they're not successful at achieving 80% on the module exam. After the first try, some sort of instructor intervention is required, and that again is up to each college, and then if they choose each instructor individually. For the flexibly paced classes that are software-based, there is typically homework that gets generated automatically by the software when a student does not achieve mastery on the module exam. And then the retesting takes place for both the flexibly paced or the seated classes. Okay. So what is student reaction to all of this? What have the beta and the pilot schools seen so far? Well, as you can imagine, change is tough, and this is a lot of change. So it takes a while for students and faculty really to get adjusted to this type of change. But slowly but surely, we're seeing them come around and learn a whole lot more and be successful in their subsequent courses. When we talked about test anxiety for your flexibly paced courses, we like to stress to our students that they test when they're ready to test, and not necessarily when the class as a whole is ready, and just hopefully that alone reduces some of the test anxiety. And for our seated classes, there's a smaller amount of material. It's not that do or die final exam on multiple chapters, and so we hope that reduces test anxiety as well. The financial implications, just a couple of points that we wanted to mention, is that these modules, as you know, are all 1-credit modules versus the 4-credit course. Since there are multiple exit points, students, except for our STEM students, will not be needing as much developmental math. This can make it difficult for some of the students to consistently use math to achieve that full-time status that they so often want.
So just a few general points to consider as instructors in a seated classroom. We're moving more from the lecturer to the teacher. Need to continue to develop the ability to build community among students and work individually with students as opposed to just a lecturer in the front of the room. So interaction, again, that being able to ask the questions, does what you are doing make sense, not just what you are seeing me do. Managing multiple tasks at one time. This comes into the role of manager as much as educator. And then finally, question, again, going back to the student, and in whatever the delivery method is, encouraging the student to become responsible for their understanding, for their learning.
I believe the biggest change for instructors with the flexible paced courses is that you can have students working anywhere in any of the DMA simultaneously. So your comfort level and your familiarity with the curriculum needs to be across all 8 DMAs at the same time. You could be helping one student with sign numbers and the very next question has something perhaps to do with rational exponents. So that comfort level needs to be there. You are definitely managing multiple tasks at once, helping students work individually, monitoring your student tutors if you have any. One of the very important factors in flexibly paced lab is to make sure everyone in there follows the prescribed guidelines. So if your college has students watch videos and then do some exercises in the workbook and then the online homework, it can sometimes be challenging to get every tutor and every instructor to make sure that students follow that prescribed method of completing things. We need to email students every week and monitor their online time. That's probably the most difficult part, is monitoring the online time and honestly getting students to work outside of the fixed class time. And to make sure that we have contact with every student at every class meeting, letting them know we know where they are, we know what they're working on, helping them meet the completion schedule and work through the pacing guide. For both the seated and the flexibly paced instructors, the familiarity with the software, whether your entire class is in an Emporium or flexibly paced delivery, or whether you're using technology to supplement perhaps just for homework, really the ability to feel very comfortable with the technology is of utmost importance. And the constant ongoing training, both face-to-face, perhaps Moodle or Blackboard sites, training manuals that sometimes have illustrations of some of the snapshots from your online software, or illustrations of some of the more difficult problems, and that's useful both for faculty and tutors and adjuncts. Okay, and then monitoring the student tutors along with training them, potentially asking them to work through the course, all the homeworks, so that they have, again, familiarity with everything that they could possibly be asked about, since there is such a broad spectrum of material all going on at the same time.
So more possibilities. Just want to make sure that we have covered all of these things to consider. Will instruction be online, or will be there some instructor-led opportunities? If you're in an Emporium kind of setting, will you have mini lectures, pull-outs, workshop sessions? Same thing even in a seated. How will you incorporate group activities? And what about out-of-class assignments? Is that where your study skills would be integrated? Specific weekly assignments, how will that build with the current class time and structure? What about testing? Do you have a testing center? Will you use a testing center? Will the tests be online? Will all of the tests, no matter what your delivery method, be in the classroom, seated, paper and pencil? The possibilities are infinite. Again, it's what works at your college with your students and your faculty. One of the things that has come up in my beta test is the communication with the tutors. And I've had students, particularly when we're working a conceptual kind of activity or more conceptual approach to a topic, a student would say, now what is it exactly that I should ask the tutor to help me with? So communication with the tutors. So we have an academic learning center. As the curriculum changes, make sure that they're involved in and aware of the changes to help the tutors communicate with the students and to help the students communicate with the tutors. It's not just, okay, go see the tutor and factor trinomials. Much more difficult to express the interpretation of that. So resources. Mentors are important. As we go through this process together across the state, it's not that there is one way to do it. It's not that there's a prescribed method. What we can share with you is what we've tried and we think is working, what we've tried and it didn't work for us, although that will not mean that it wouldn't work for you. So as a part of the successnc.org, there is or will shortly be mentors available. These are colleges that are currently doing beta pilot testing, just to talk more one-on-one in terms of things that we have tried or questions that you might encounter. So there's the website. If, of course, you've been there, I guess, to register for the webinar. And then the NCLOR, we have asked that you stay tuned for more information there. There will be an instructor toolkit available shortly, and that will also be communicated at the successnc.org site. So that brings us to questions. How have we addressed the questions that you're facing? Let us know what you would like for us to follow up on.
Thank you, Cindy and Susan. We do have a few questions, and I've put those on the screen. We can talk about those now.
Okay, the first one, yes, I will be glad to share that sample of the flexible paste. Probably the best thing would be to email me, cindy.fowler@cpcc.edu, and I will just send that directly to you. Sample paste schedules for all modules, yes, be glad to do that. All of the ones that we have done flexibly paced, and Guilford has them as well, and so yes, just send an email either to Cindy or Susan, and we'll be glad to respond to that.
Remediation and retesting being optional. If a student does not achieve 80% on the module test, they must retest or repeat the entire module. Some form of remediation is required between the first test and the second test, and that's up to each college or each instructor as to how they carry that out.
One of the other, this is still back at question 3, you know, local policies can determine this. For example, I believe it's Pitt is having students who don't score at least 60% on their first test, then they're not eligible for remediation and retesting. It's such a quick turnaround that the reality of remediating a student who scores 20 or 30% on the first test in one day is just not, you know, it's just not going to happen. So certainly local guidelines can be implemented there, but the retest option is a recommendation. Question 4, is it required to incorporate study skills in the modules? Each module has with it student success tips that are suggestions and recommendations. It certainly would be to the benefit of the student to incorporate those, but how and to what extent that happens, that would be up to the local college to decide.
Okay, so the evaluation process with one student, that'll be at a different place than another. If this was a flexibly paced course, the instructor monitors every student through their online software, and they can determine where they are and if they're on pace to finish and if they're keeping up with the completion schedule. And it's up to that individual instructor to submit the grades for, right now, for each course, 60, 70, 80, and coming soon for each of the individual DMAs. Can we get an e-copy on question 6? Can we get an e-copy of the contact people who are currently using the DMAs? I believe we can get that to you. Again, if you'll email Cindy or Susan, we will be able to get you that copy or e-copy of all the contact people. Question 7, is there assessment? Is there any assessment before the first test? And if so, how is it done? I believe each school has different policies about that. Some of them, GTCC does give an assessment prior to any homeworks or any material that is completed within a module, and those assessments are then linked to the homework in the module so that the student is only completing the homework that corresponds to the questions they got wrong. There's some more on that. Hang on one second.
And I'll just add to that. One of the things that I thought, gosh, you know, if I'm going to make this change and make these assessments more conceptual and then all of a sudden I'm just going to give my students at the end of 4 weeks, here's the test, pass it or not. Don't they need the opportunity to practice some of these assessments? So the first time through, I tried to build in, and that's the pay schedule that you saw earlier. I tried to build in a mid-module assessment, counted as a quiz grade. The problem is that some of the modules in terms of timing are very tight. It worked well in Module 3. It's much more difficult to do in some of the other modules. So that's just another suggestion, an idea. If you wanted to do a mid-module quiz, you could. Any other questions?
Thank you, Cindy and Susan. I think that's all of the questions for today. Do you have any final comments before we wrap up?
I would just say good luck. We're all in this together, and we certainly will offer suggestions and try to answer as many questions as we can. And keep at it. It's going to be a process for all of us.
Thank you very much, Cindy and Susan, for your presentation and for talking about these questions today. This concludes our webinar, and on behalf of North Carolina Community Colleges, thank you and have a great day.